Well, hello again, brothers and sisters in Christ. Hopefully, this midweek meditation finds you well. It is another interesting week and never a dull moment at Emmanuel Lutheran Church. With that being said, we have the joy of another baptism this weekend. We just had a baptism. I enjoy those immensely. Things are going well. Personal chaos aside, things are going well. With that being said, the text. Last week was the first Sunday of Lent, and we had the great joy of, the temptation text. Lent always begins with that, with the story of Christ being tempted in the wilderness. We go from his baptism directly into the wilderness and temptation. And it's a good story, and it's important for us to see how he handles temptation for us. That is often the key piece of it. We see Christ entering into numerous realities, not because not because he needs it, but because we need him too. That is often one of those key pieces when we're asked questions like, why is he baptized? Well, why is this? Why is this? Because as part of the incarnation, he took on that for us and enters into it for us as the amazing incarnation that is Jesus Christ. Now, the fascinating thing is this week is this amazing text where it is Nicodemus and Jesus talking about baptism in the middle of the night. And I want to focus on that as part of the sermon because with two baptisms and the Nicodemus text and all those other sorts of things, it's great. But what can easily be missed is the other lessons. We have stuff with Abraham. Abraham is given a promise in our first lesson. And the story of Abraham, I think, is important because it really, really shows us how God is a God of faithfulness and a God of promise. From the get-go, in working with Abraham, God chooses him. Out of him is going to make this nation and do this process to save all of humanity from itself in many ways. And it's a long game, and God plays the long game. And that is one of the hiccups Abraham, or Abram in our text, has. God plays the long game. I promise you, you will have offspring, you will have this happen. And because he gets stressed, and text from here on out will illuminate that, he gets stressed about it, he tries to, tip God's hand. He tries to move up God's timetable and has Ishmael. But that's not part of the plan. It was not meant to be Ishmael, it was meant to be Isaac. It was supposed to be his offspring from Sarah. And so he really flubs on that one. But what does God do? God continues to work with him, even through his mess-ups. And that is the fascinating thing about God's promises. If you see through it the Exodus, you see through Peter, you see it over and over and over again. God promises. God says, look, here's where we're going to get to. It might not be the path that you choose, but we're going to get there. And human beings often do the opposite of when they scream, Jesus, take the wheel. They're trying to yank certain things out of God's hand and be like, no, it's got to be on this timetable or this way. And they almost roll the car. But God and God's faithfulness gets it back on track. Sometimes it's wonky. Sometimes it's 40 days in the wilderness. Sometimes it's this, that, and the other. But God gets his people back on track to get them where they need to be. And that is hopefully the good news of this midweek meditation. Sometimes things go off track. Sometimes we jump the rails. Sometimes things do not go the way that we want to get to where God is leading us. That doesn't mean that God is not faithful. I mean, I'm living through that process right now. My life plan is not going the way that I hoped. But there is this underlying thing that goes with my worry, my frustration, my anxiety, that the good Lord knows what he is doing. As a wise man once told me, it's not his first rodeo. And so there is this hope and this struggle of faith in God's faithfulness. God is always faithful, and that is where our faith needs to lie. Not in our control, not in our work in getting God where we want God to be. That doesn't mean it's necessarily passive. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. It doesn't mean it's necessarily pretty. But to trust the one who makes the promise, you trust the one that will lead you there. And so if you find yourself maybe a little bit off-road, maybe off the map, maybe not where you'd hope to be at this week, this month, this year, trust that God is not done. One of the great things about this being a 150-year-old congregation is I will put money down that there are numerous points in this history. Oh, 150. We're past 150 for a while. We're getting closer to the 175th probably. I digress. But that being at a congregation like this, if you're willing to take the moment and think about what this congregation has been through, you know what I mean? Tail end of, in the aftermath of a civil war, 2 world wars, all of these realities, economic collapses and these sorts of things, it has seen it. It has gone through it. The people have lived through it. Numerous moments were not pretty. But it is a modern sign of what we hear from Abraham, what we hear from Moses, what we hear from the prophets, what we hear from Habakkuk, what we hear from Jesus, what we hear from Paul. I mean, God was faithful to Paul, and he had a lot of ups and downs, strikes and gutters. That is for us as well. So this week, as you go on and we get to Sunday, we'll talk about baptism. And the baptism is also connected to God's faithfulness. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Know that even if you find yourself in a wonky spot, God's faithfulness has not ended. Well, we preach best what we need to hear. Hopefully this finds you well. As always, if you need something, feel free to give me a holler. Continue to hopefully do this work of Lent. Remember, take time for those devotions. Those devotional books are great. Take time for prayer. If you haven't done it yet, that's okay. Start now. Don't guilt yourself into not doing. Grace yourself into moving forward. Blessings, brothers and sisters. I'll talk to you later. Bye now.